Today, I want to discuss 10 things you absolutely need to know to have discussions on Gaza and everything that happened in the past almost 2 years. And the reason why I think it's very important that you start becoming more eloquent on the topic is because of two reasons. The first one being that World Economic Forum is now predicting that there's going to be a catastrophic cybersecurity event in the upcoming 2 years. They published a report 2 years ago, and basically they're saying that 93% of cyber leaders and 86% of business leaders say that it's very likely that this is going to take place, and you have to take into account the World Economic Forum also predicted the pandemic. And so they seem to be knowing, very coincidentally, all these catastrophic things that are going to happen. And so this would mean that everything that's come out in the past 20 months will be possibly erased forever, or at least not accessible for a time frame that we are not sure about right now. And so they're predicting this with a very high factor. 93% of cyber leaders are saying it. And so another reason why I think it's very important that everybody becomes more eloquent on the topic. So I'm talking about, don't just reshare topics or posts or articles about what happens in Gaza. Memorize them. The reason why I think it's important to memorize them is because in the US, they're already introducing bills right now to teach a alternative version of what happened on the 7th of October to their students. And so this alternative version obviously doesn't talk about what happened to the Palestinians. So like all these thousands and thousands and thousands of deaths are ignored. Children, women, infants, babies, people who are disabled, crimes against, surgeons, they're all gonna ignore that. What they do wanna teach the students, however, they wanna make this by law obligatory, is the following. The students need to know about the attacks committed by Hamas, the history of anti-Semitism, as if we have not learned enough about that already. I mean, in Europe, for example, this is a big part of the curriculum in history class. I mean, it's not allowed to have an alternative opinion about these events. You might even go to jail. And in some countries, including in the Netherlands, the books by, for example, the perpetrator of the Second World War are banned. So, this alternative version of history has already been implemented and nobody is allowed to question it. And so here they're also saying, nobody is allowed to question this because otherwise it will be called anti-Semitism. And they're saying that, because of these attacks, anti-Semitism and anti-Israel rhetoric spread. Why would that be? Why would that spread all of a sudden if they're a victim? And then they want to say that people need to learn about how social media is to blame for that. And that denial and distortion of these events is anti-Semitism. That's also what you need to learn. Like, how brainwashed. But okay, anyways, so what I want to do is for you to know how to use 10 terms so that you can effectively have these conversations in your life without, without just having to reshare things other people say. I want you to be able to have the conversation on 7th of October, because in case everything will be erased, it is very important that you're able to continue the conversation on what happened. Give this information to your children, talk about it with the people around you, and make sure the next generations will be able to learn about this event, even if they change anything on the internet, or if they are, massively going to implement this curriculum, which completely ignores what happened to the Palestinians. Okay, so the top 10 terms, which I think are very important, I'm going to outline them here for you. And just to give you some background, I majored in political science. My research at the time was featured in international media. I worked for UNICEF, the International Criminal Court, German Marshall Fund of the United States. But what I'm going to do is quote other experts, professors, credible media outlets, so that you don't have to believe me, believe them. And for anyone who is going to be upset about it, email them, okay? This is not my personal opinion. These are opinions spread by professors, credible media outlets. So don't be like crying in my comment section. I'm just telling you what they're saying. I'm just explaining definitions. I'm just sharing events, okay? So the first definition I want you to know about is the term genocide. Genocide, according to UN, means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. So this means that, the goal needs to be to destroy these groups, right? So people from an ethnicity, a nationality, or a religious group. And so in the case of Palestinians, the Gazans, I would say it's more about their ethnicity than it is about religion, because there's also many Christians who've been killed. And this has nothing per se to do with passports or, just because, it's religion. It's literally the location that's being targeted in this case, right? Okay. And so this has been confirmed. Gaza has been confirmed to be a genocide. So what's happening right now in Gaza, it's a genocide. And that's according to the Dean's Professor of Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Brown University, Omer Bartov, and he is an American Israeli citizen, historian who used to fight in the IDF, okay? So just so you know that, this has been confirmed by someone who identifies as Israeli himself and who fought in the IDF. And so he said that he would use that word. It's a genocide, but he said that he did grow up as a Zionist in Israel. And he said, I served in the Israeli military for 4 years, but he says Israel is carrying out a pattern of operations to systematically destroy Gaza. Okay, so I just want you to know that. Okay, and then that's not the only situation that I think is very heavy in accepting that this is a genocide. Then 2 weeks into the genocide, there were 800 scholars and practitioners of international law, conflict studies, and genocide studies who signed a public statement saying that there's already the possibility of a genocide being perpetrated by the IDF against Palestinians. And this was only 2 weeks after the conflict happened. They already said, the signs are there. I'm warning the world, this is about to happen. And then what happened is that everything that a genocide is supposed to be was being committed in Gaza, And so I'm going to talk about very specific acts that constitute a genocide so that you can also educate yourself on that. Okay, and so I'm going to also share these sources because Omer Bartov's article, you can read it in the NPR, and the 800 experts who signed a letter, you can read about it more on Euromed Human Rights Monitor's website, okay? Then, the second thing I want to discuss with you is the femi-genocide term. And this means that it's not just a genocide, but it's a genocide that targets women and girls. And so UN Special Rapporteur Reem As-Salem is describing that this is what's happening in Gaza right now. Israel is committing a femi-genocide. And so she presented evidence of the IDF deliberately targeting Palestinian women and girls to disrupt reproductive continuity. Can you imagine this? And so she spoke from Brussels, and she revealed that 67% of Gaza's deaths are female. 67%, okay? 150,000 pregnant women were denied health care. 150,000. 70,000 were suffering malnutrition. And she said that the blockade of baby formula and systematic reproductive violence echo Nazi siege tactics. She said that there were 2,600 miscarriages and newborns with war-induced deformities. So anytime any woman or any person wants to talk about feminism or women's empowerment, ask them, How hard did you go during the Gaza genocide? Like, what did you do? Because that wasn't just a genocide, it was a femi-genocide. And anyone who wants to talk about feminism or wants to talk about women's empowerment, which to me, those terms, they don't even exist anymore. Ask them, but what did you do during this genocide? When did you speak up? Were you also there protesting for the rights of the Gazan women? No, you were not. So we don't need to then also advocate for women who are living in luxury positions and want to have a better job and make more money if we did not advocate for these women who are being deliberately targeted because of their gender, okay? Femi-genocide, very relevant, very relevant. Then the third definition that I want you to know about is starvation. And so Cambridge Dictionary said that this is the state of having no food for a long period, often causing death. And so according to UN, the World Food Program assessments show that a quarter of the population is facing famine-like conditions right now in Gaza. And almost 100,000 women and children are suffering from severe acute malnutrition and need treatment as soon as possible. And a third of the population has not been eating for multiple days in a row. And this was July 2025. And I just want to add a few more events to illustrate how Israel is causing forced starvation, not just by not letting aid in, but also by letting aid in and then using that opportunity to scare people off to ever try to receive aid again because they're mass killing them, okay? So first of all, the flour massacre, this was the first time when people were queuing for aid and then being shot because they were queuing up for aid in Gaza. And this was on the 29th of February. And, you know, this was something that was condemned by UN. It was a massacre, the flour massacre. And Israeli troops fired on crowds of Palestinians who gathered to collect flour in the southwest of Gaza City. They killed at least 112 people. So this was one of those first moments when the whole world was like, what is happening? Like, this is outrageous. And it went down in history as flour massacre, and this is a term you absolutely need to know. When you want to talk about starvation, you also need to know that even when they were supposedly trying to relieve the people from starvation, they were using it as an opportunity to genocide them. Okay, but that wasn't the only one, because there was a much worse one, more worse one in 2025, and that was when the US and Israeli-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation had been linked to over 1,000 deaths when people were queuing up in cages for food. And so this is something that's been, there's been so many crazy things already, but this has been one of the latest ones. More than 1,000 people were killed. And so there was this lieutenant, Anthony Aguilar. He was a whistleblower. He worked for GHF, and he revealed on the Tucker Carlson show that they were actually working for the IDF. So this organization from the US was being paid by the IDF, and they got also instructions to shoot unarmed people. And he told a very specific story about this little boy, Amir, who came up to him to thank him for the aid, kissed his hand out of respect, and then someone shot him. Okay, so when we talk about starvation, we're going to talk about how people don't have food for a long time. They're using moments to give them food, to genocide them again, and how, this is just completely inhumane. This has been observed, identified by many different human rights organizations as completely inhumane, completely unacceptable. Then we have the fourth term that I want to share with you, which is ecocide. And so ecocide is going to be important for the rest of our lives, guys. Ecocide means the following: purposely destroying animals and plants and the environment subsequently. And so Israel is committing an ecocide, and The Guardian has published the findings of a report where it said that Israel is committing an ecocide, okay? And so in the future, anytime anyone wants to talk about the environment, and you know how they love to use the environment to police countries like China. They want to police small countries in Asia or in South America and be like, oh, but you're not following the rules. Please remind them of the ecocide in Gaza. And if you didn't speak up for the ecocide in Gaza, you better not speak up for any other environmental crime worldwide, because you simply don't care. You're just using environmental damage as a way to control other countries. If you didn't speak up for Gaza, don't speak up for any other country, because what is happening here, it's an ecocide. I'm going to tell you what an ecocide is, okay? Well, I'm going to tell you what it is in the context of Gaza. So, Guardian says 80% of Gaza's trees are gone. 2/3 of farmland has been destroyed. More than 40 million tons of rubble litter Gaza. Much of it is toxic. 141 makeshift garbage dumps exist. 97% of groundwater was already poisoned, but now it's even worse. And experts argue that Israel may be guilty of environmental war crimes under the Geneva Convention. Gaza is a biodiversity hotspot, by the way, home to a lot of different birds and mammal species. And satellite imagery shows near total loss of vegetation and bird habitats. UN's Food and Agriculture Organization, they also indicate that almost 15,000 or 95% of Gaza's cattle has died. And areas like Wadi Gaza, which is a protective nature reserve, are now destroyed. So that's just the ecocide. And I think what's really important to know is that the long-term climate cost of destroying, clearing, and rebuilding Gaza could top 31 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. And this is more than the combined 2023 annual greenhouse gases emitted by Costa Rica and Estonia. So like, just to show you how much pollution this war against Gaza has caused. And, you know, nobody's taking action. UN's climate body has not taken action. Nobody is telling them to, you know, do this, or there's going to be these consequences, and then push through. None of these organizations have done that. So to me, anytime anyone brings up environmental damages or concerns from now on, the question has to be, but what did you do for Gaza? That's all. Furthermore, there's been a UK professor, and he concluded that the US dropped 12 kilotons of weapons on Hiroshima, but in Gaza, it's been registered that 125 kilotons of weapons are dropped on Gaza, okay? So if you ever want to make this comparison, just know that what happened in Gaza is 10 times what happened in Hiroshima. So that was his conclusion. So if you ever want to have, you know, a comparison, look at what happened in Hiroshima and just know 10 times that extent of what happened there happened in Gaza, okay? Just to let you know how severe this is. Okay, then we're at term number 5, which is medicide. Okay, medicide is a really important word because medicide is the deliberate destruction of Gaza's capacity to live. And so AJ published an article on this, and they say, you know, each murdered professional represents years of training and experience and commitment to save lives. And each bombed hospital is the dismantling of Gaza's capacity to heal itself, to survive, to endure. And these are not just lives lost, these are futures destroyed, okay? And so they're saying the reason why they're targeting medical professionals is also because these people would serve as witnesses after such a war for a court to determine, you know, how badly people have been harmed and injured, and like how, you know, inhumane it's been, like, for example, snipers targeting children. Medical professionals would be the ones to be a witness in such cases. And these are the people who are being targeted, just so you know. And so according to World Health Organization, they've recorded 697 attacks on hospitals since October 2023. And yeah, that's the majority of them were attributed to IDF, obviously. But then there's also specific cases which are really good to know about, to illustrate it, to make it more humane, and also to have the conversation more effectively. I think it's very important to know the following names. The first one, Adnan Al-Bursh. He was the head of orthopedics at the Gaza Al-Shifa hospital. And according to UN rapporteur Francesca, she said his life ended after probably being raped inside the hospital. Then he was dragged outside. He was half naked, bled to death in this open place in the prison, and he died. So that was one person that I think is really important to know. But then right now, it's now July 2025, Dr. Hussam Abu Sufyan, he's still being detained by the IDF, and Amnesty is advocating for his release. But this is another example of how meticide is taking place in Gaza and how the IDF is committing that. Okay, but next to that, there's a ton of other examples of medical crimes which are committed by the IDF. For example, Euromed Human Rights Monitor, they published a report where it says that they detected several signs of possible organ theft by the IDF. And so that's the medical professionals, they detected that. And also the Israeli army probably dug up, or not probably, they said in the report, they dug up and confiscated bodies from a mass grave in Al-Shifa Medical Complex. And there have been reports in recent years of unlawful use of Palestinian corpses held by Israel, including the theft of organs and their use in Israeli university medical school labs. And Haaretz also published a report a few years ago saying that Israel is thought to be the biggest hub for illegal globe trade in human organs. So this is nothing new for Israel, just so you know. This is kind of what they've been doing for a long time. Okay, then we have number 6, which is the targeted killing of children. That's definition number 6 that I want you to remember, targeted killings of children. So I'm going to give you some examples. For example, Al-Nasser Children's Hospital, some of the most vulnerable in a society, incubator babies, were targeted by the IDF. Al-Nasser Children's Hospital, 10th of November, 5 incubator babies were left behind because the people who were working there had to leave the facility. These babies were on oxygen. They had to be left behind. They couldn't take the machines with them. The babies died. Al-Shifa, months before, 8 babies died, also because they were tied to oxygen machines. And similar scenes have taken place in other hospitals as well. Other children, famous children who have been targeted, who I think you absolutely need to know. For example, Hind Rajab, you absolutely need to know her name. I mean, if you know Anne Frank's name, like I literally been to her museum when I was younger in school in the Netherlands. But Hind Rajab is that person for us because this was a baby, a 5-year-old, who was sitting in a car that was targeted by the IDF with 335 bullets when they knew she was there. They knew this baby, 5-year-old baby, was in this car surrounded by dead family members for 3 hours. She was calling the rescue workers, crying on the phone, like, please come get me. She knew, like, she said the tanks were near her. She was crying, please come get me, please come get me. And 2 rescue workers tried to save her. They killed them. Then they killed this baby as well. First, they denied it. AJ and the Washington Post have done research themselves, investigations. They confirmed that it was IDF weapons, it was IDF who was there, and the rescue workers also confirmed they were talking to IDF to ask if they could help her, which they were denied for many hours, and then everybody who was involved there got killed. Okay, so everybody, I mean, like the baby got killed, her family members got killed, the rescue workers who wanted to help her got killed. Yeah, so this is a name you need to know. This was the 29th of January, 2024. I want you to memorize this. Hind Rajab, a 5-year-old baby sitting in a car, blood-soaked with dead family members around her. The IDF shot the car she was in and her 335 times. Never forget, okay? Then another one of those examples that just show like also the pride in killing babies. So Israeli X account open source intel, they report on news. They tweeted the grandson of Hamas negotiator eliminated. And basically, the J Post also reported on it. It was the grandson of Khalil Ahaya. They were talking about a 2-year-old. The grandson of the Hamas member who was eliminated was 2 years old. And like, this was world news for them. Like, afterwards, they deleted it because I think then when the world was like, what did you just say? Probably then they were like, oh, let me just delete that because that sounded really crazy. But for them, like, that was really normal. Like, J-Post, the article by J-Post, it's still up, where they're talking about the killing of this child. But they don't say he's 2 years old. They just say the grandson of this Hamas member. I don't even get that. Okay. Then we have number 7. I want you to know the term bioterrorism because that's what happened in Gaza. And according to Lemkin Institute for Genocide Prevention, Israel is committing bioterrorism because they put narcotics in the flour distributed by Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. To be specific, oxycodone. So Lemkin Institute wrote an article about it. The article will be linked so that nobody cries to me. If you want to cry about that, send them an email. Don't be in my comment section, me, anti-Semitism, me. This is literally been studied by experts. This is not my professional opinion, like not me who majored in political science, worked for ICC or UNICEF, not me, okay? The Lemkin Institute for Genocide Prevention, they said Israel is committing bioterrorism, okay? They said that. All right. Then we have number 8, psychological warfare. The definition by Stanford University. Psychological warfare aims at the insecurities and desires of its targets and uses these as a means of achieving objectives. And so Doctors Without Borders, they say that this is something that IDF does because they use things like last-minute displacement as a tool, a violent tool. And the thing is, like, these displacements, they don't comply with international humanitarian law because they're not taking any measures to provide accommodation for the evacuated population or ensure that these are taking place in a safe way with hygiene, health, safety, and nutrition. And so don't cry. Again, UN said that, not me. Okay, UN has said it. So again, don't cry in my comment section. This is not something I said. This is something UN said. If you're angry with UN, you need to send them a letter and then be like, me, not me. Okay, anyways, I would say there's definitely psychological warfare going on. I think everybody knows this, but okay, anyways, if you want me to give a few examples, I would say the case of Mohammed Bar is the worst example of psychological warfare. I'm gonna tell you, a 24-year-old with Down syndrome and autism was bitten to death by a military dog released by the IDF while his family members watched, his mom had to watch while her baby was being attacked by a military dog and he bled to death by his own. His family was held with gunpoint, had to leave the home. They left him to bleed to death. This sweet, sweet boy, he literally pet the dogs and he said, no, enough, my dear, enough, because he didn't understand the situation. In case you don't know, a person with Down syndrome, he usually gets stuck at the age of 8, I think. So he had the mental age of 8 years old. And this kid, if you see his picture, he looked like the sweetest kid. And I feel like they did this to torment the world, to let them know this is the level of insanity we're dealing with, to let the people in Gaza know you're next. We did it to a boy with Down syndrome. Like, why wouldn't we do it to you? Another example, which I think is a great example of their psychological warfare, was this older lady, Safia Al-Jamal. She was 65 years old, and she was crushed while she was alive with a military tank, Israeli military tank. They used her as a human shield for 3 hours. Then she was injured. Her son, Mohammed, he was told by the soldiers to carry her, his wounded mom, to a hospital. But then at some point they ordered her to be put down, and then they crushed her. They ran over her with a military tank while the boy, her son watched. Her son watched this all happen. Like, it's so sick. It's so sick that even hearing it, like, I cannot function when I hear these things. And I think that's the point. That's the point. They want all people who care about, humanity to hear this and just be distraught. Most of all Palestinians, but I think pretty much the entire world, because, like, why would you do something so crazy? Like, why would you do something so crazy? It's a mental war. Then we have number 9, and that's the journocide. It is the killing of the truth, the killing of all these journalists. And Reporters Without Borders states that there is targeted killings of journalists. That's something they stated on their website. The stats, according to UN Human Rights Office, is that, they killed 18 journalists in May 2025 alone. They have verified the killings of 227 Palestinian journalists in Gaza since the 7th of October, which was 197 men and 30 women. And UN has condemned this. CNN has said that 2024 was the deadliest year for journalists because of what Israel is doing, obviously. And if you want to know about specific cases, we know about Motaz Azaisa. I don't know if I say it right, but Motaz Azaisa. He has posted a lot about how he was being haunted, intimidated, threatened by the IDF when he was still in Gaza because he was reporting on the war, on the genocide. So that was a very personal, I would say, example of what was happening. But then we also had a very famous case of Wael Dahdu, and he's a very famous journalist. He looks like a human teddy bear, by the way, and I think everybody remembers he was reporting live on Al Jazeera TV when he received a call where someone let him know that there was an attack on his family, who was living in a safe zone, by the way, and they killed his wife and 2 children and his grandchild. And this was one of the worst moments, I think maybe the worst moment in television, to watch something happen like that. He's a hero because he did, mourn on television. You've seen him probably not really break down, but he had a very difficult moment. But he came back to TV to continue reporting on what happened because he cared so much about what was happening in Gaza. And that's why he was such a symbol of hope and strength, but it was also an illustration of the genocide that was happening there. May Allah really give him strength and help him and his family get through this. And may Allah grant all his family members the highest level of Jannah. And then finally, the 10th term that I want to share with you is scholasticide. And UN experts, they have expressed grave concern over the pattern of attacks on schools, university teachers, and students in the Gaza Strip. More than 80% of schools in Gaza is damaged or destroyed. And, the question is if it will ever be possible for, the academic community to live again in this region. And I think that's the goal, right? That they don't want people to be able to get educated in Gaza. One of the most impressive things I've seen in Gaza was that during the war, a guy who was doing his PhD, he actually graduated while living in this war. And I think it illustrated how smart these people are because I think they're the most educated people in occupation. Their literacy levels are higher than the US, which is not hard, but also higher than Israel itself. So just to let you know, the Palestinians. And I think that's been must have been hard for Israel to accept. And so these are 10 terms that I want you to remember. I want you to be able to use these in conversations. I want you to be able to challenge people who pretend to care about human rights, women's rights, children's rights, free press, freedom of speech, the environment, any one of these things. And for you to then be able to speak up and say, that's very interesting you said that, but if you didn't care about this catastrophic events in Gaza taking place, you did not speak up for it, you did not condemn it, you did not do anything, then I don't think you should be, raising your voices about all these other people or countries that you're trying to criticize for, doing something wrong, because that's, again, people weaponizing these types of violations when it suits them, but not when it matters. And so that's something that I think is very important. I'm gonna make sure that you have this document so you can download it. I want you to be able to read through it yourself, to check out all the sources. Everything I've said had a source. If I made a mistake, please let me know so I can correct it. I'd be happy to do that so that we have something that we can work with. I look forward to seeing you again next week, inshallah, and make sure to continue to have the conversation on this topic because this is very important. Thank you so much for watching.